Over 42 million Americans owe more than $1.6 trillion in student debt and loans, according to Wallet Hub. That averages out to about $38,000 in loans per borrower. But all that cash doesn't have to come from the debtor. Some employers are also helping alleviate that student loan pressure. Here with the latest, we've got Edward Gottfried, who is the Betterment at Work Senior Director of Product Management. Great to have you here with us. So what's, in terms of the percentage, do you see some of the employers helping their employees out with?
It's a great question, Brad. What we're seeing is that in general, it's not that common yet for employers to play a direct role in supporting their employees with student loan debt, but that's changing relatively rapidly. And I think the dip in the chart that you just showed is sort of evidence to that. Back in 2019, it was only about 8% of employers who were offering any kind of support for their employees with student loans. But recent legislation that went into effect at the beginning of this year makes it possible for employers to treat student loan payments as eligible for a 401k match. So what that means is that their employees who are actively repaying student loans but may not be able to contribute enough to reach that 401k match can instead show evidence of the 401k or to the 401k of the student loan repayments and get an employer match into their 401k. So that's sort of an interesting indirect way for employers to play a more active role in supporting their employees. Now, the other thing that some employers do is they will directly contribute to loans. So they'll maybe match repayments dollar for dollar into student loans. It's certainly less common than the 401k treatment.
And so as we're thinking about this, we also have to think about it in the context of where there is some call normalization or some call attrition within the workplace or even turnover within the workplace as well, especially given that the labor market is vastly different than it was even 2 years ago, which kind of starts to account for some of that dip that we may have been seeing towards the end of that, as minimal as it is. But all of these things considered, when you do see a changing in the mind frame of how employers are looking at the labor market, how does that also trickle through to the amount of them that are paying off and helping pay off student loans?
I think that one thing that you are seeing is a pretty stiff level of competition for talent. So a great thing that's happened in the last 5 years is that the 401k has become really a table stakes benefit across employers of all size. While traditionally it was reserved for really large employers, now even small employers are offering it. There have been state mandates across a number of different states that have made it a requirement for small employers. And so as a result, anything that you can do as an employer to create a little bit of a competitive edge for hiring or for retaining talent becomes really, really potent. And I think that's part of what we're seeing drive more employers to adopt a student loan repayment benefit, either in concert with their 401k or as an independent offering. And the other thing that you're seeing is with the end of the student loan repayment moratorium, this is more of a top of mind issue for employees and employers both. And that's helped to move many employers who were maybe considering for several years the possibility of adding on this benefit and bringing them into actively sponsoring or rolling out benefits to help their employees with student loans.
So what tips do you have for people who are trying to make sure that they can take advantage of this potential benefit with their employer?
Well, I think the most important first step is ask your employer what they do, what they support, whether this is part of the 401k program, whether they have a separate program to directly support you in repaying your student loan debt. If they don't, I think it's really important to make clear to your employer that that's something that you would highly value. And if they do, they should be able to give you some instructions on how to take advantage of it. There may be a separate place within the 401k platform where you can go to give evidence of the repayments that you're making that your employer will then take into consideration for making an annual employer match into the 401k.
Edward Gottfried, who is the Betterment at Work Senior Director of Product Management. Thanks so much for taking the time, Ed.
Thank you, Brad.